Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTrain.tv, where every day at this time slot, we are excited to be covering different topics regarding the Claris FileMaker platform, I should say. And so we're going to be continuing the OData conversation momentarily. As a reminder, if you want to support the channel, feel free to purchase one of our training subscriptions. We greatly appreciate that. That's how we afford to pay Margaret and to keep the lights on. So let me pivot to our presenter for today. John Renfrew has been talking with us about OData. So the broadcast today is day 3. Day 1 is kind of laying the framework. I'm using Margaret as our benchmark because I know probably have a better background about this topic than most people do, yet I haven't really done OData. But I'm using Margaret because Margaret's kind of this person, the person that we see here, or at least I see her on my screen. And she is the one who has been She's the one who's been learning the FileMaker platform. It's kind of at an intermediate level. A lot of FileMaker people have a skill set similar to hers, so it's very valuable for me to have someone like that in the conversation. With that in mind, we'll start day 3 of our OData journey, right?
We can see the screen. We're on day 3 of the OData with John and Richard. So what we're just going to do is take one quick step backwards into yesterday. As in where we ended up with is actually doing some things. So the first thing was writing a script that in FileMaker that could do a GET request asking for data. Obviously, there's some pieces that we have to put together to be able to feed into the insert from URL script step. And the simplest thing is, hey, we just need it's a GET, and we have something about the authorization, which is the username and password. What we want back, and we're saving the answer into the header. Obviously, that's important. After that, we're going to look for various errors, both FileMaker script errors, but we're also going to see what the header that's been returned to us is giving, because that's an HTTP value. Something like 200 is a good thing and 400 is a bad thing, just so that we know what's going on. We then moved on to, hey, let's create a record, which is a post instead of a GET. A little bit more needs to go into the options that we're sending. We need to tell the other end, hey, I'm sending you some JSON, because otherwise it doesn't quite know what to do with it. And here is the little line about how we send that when we've created that JSON as a variable. So 2 extra lines go into the script, but it's in all other cases, it's basically the same. And as we saw yesterday, we did try to break that a little bit. Updating a record is a combination of those 2 things. You need to know which record or records you want this action to go on, but now what we're doing is a thing called a patch. We're going to update something, but we need to update it with some data. But we only need to send the data that we're going to update. We don't need to send the whole thing. We can just send a single field and update its value. So if you have a field that is called job is done, you can modify 10 records at the end of the day to say, hey, these records are now set to the job is done. Okay, so that's kind of where we ended up yesterday. Just going to jump into today's slides. I'm going to dive out because the one thing that we didn't do yesterday, we are going to do today, because I felt I shortchanged you a little bit yesterday. Okay. So that's about deleting a record, because obviously we do want to prove that we have the full deck of cards. We have all the suits, spades, clubs, diamonds, and hearts available to us. Okay, so on the left here is this file that Richard's hosting for us, and I've just set up a quick temporary record with a user number of 999. Just for the purpose of this. So in Postman, I have a request here that says, let me move all of your pretty faces out of my way. So the first part is the same as it's always been. the domain is where the file is. The file name is this US time file. And we're in the clients table. But I'm now going to say, okay, I want to filter the client records. So I'm finding the one where the user number is 999. Okay, we learned yesterday that EQ means is equal to, and because it's a number field, it's 999 without anything around it. Okay, but this time the HTTP verb we're going to use is delete. Okay, obviously we don't need to send anything in the body with it because there's nothing. All we're going to do is say that record there, I'd like you to delete it, please. So if I just, we'll try and make this work. So there it is on the left of the screen, peeking in. I need this send button to be visible here. But what's going to happen when I hit that button is the record you see on the left should get deleted, but we also want to see what the response that we're going to get back is. There we go, sent it, and bingo, it's gone. And as you know, in FileMaker land, if you delete something, you're not getting it back anytime soon. But the important thing for us to see here, we've never seen this before, is that the response we get back from the action is a 204. It's not a 200, which we've seen, and a 201, which you saw yesterday. It's a 204. The 204 means it was successful, but there's no data to give you back. All it is I've just done the job, okay? So you know it was successful. So in our script where we're checking for errors, we'd be saying, hey, if the header says it's a 204, then we're going to treat that as good to go. That's kind of all we need to do. So let's change this up a bit to also demonstrate that this works. So there are 5 records here where the user number is the number 2. So if I change this this filter here, I'm going to say you're all with the program, and you'll be going, what I'm expecting to see is that this is going to delete all of those records where that condition is true. Okay, so we just obviously deleting one's an easy party trick. This is a bit more tricky, but we have 5 records where that is true. So if I fire off the script, yes, there you go. Thank you very much. There are now 0 records left. So the whole point about what a filter is doing, it's not just saying, oh, we've worked so far just on 1 record, just to get people into the program. A filter says anything in your set that matches that, we're going to do that. We're going to do that action on. Okay. So that's how simple a delete is. Obviously, with all the caveats of it's dangerous and you're not getting it back anytime soon.
I haven't said anything, but
go on, Rick.
the delete always makes me highly nervous. And I always, with Margaret, what do we do with your customer whenever, you know, BVA, whenever you want to do a delete, what do we do?
We copy the ID field and then put it into another ID field so the relationship is disconnected, but we can still go find it because the record still exists.
Okay, so that is a great tip. There's nothing to do with OData.
I know it has nothing to do with you at all, but it's like if it's like you're having a conversation about OData and you demonstrate how to shoot up a bank, steal the money, and rob people, and then I have to comment that, well, while that's OData and that may be okay, probably not the best behavior unless you want law enforcement up your ass. So just bang, right?
But this works hand in hand with everything FileMaker. Okay,
yep.
So the user has a privilege set. Here is the privilege set on screen. At the moment, it says you can create, edit, and delete in all tables. That's why that just worked. If I change that to create and edit in all tables, just click OK here. Just taking a moment because it's got to cross an ocean. And click OK here. Let's just go back. Let's just make a new record. In here with the user number of 999 again. Okay, so let's just go back to here. So we've got a user record of 999. We did see that just working before, but I've just gone and modified the privilege set for this user. Okay, so if I now click send, should we have a straw poll about what we think is going to happen?
I think I'm not going to find it.
It's going to fail, yeah. Well, it should.
Well, interestingly, this says that just worked, as in the command worked. There's nothing to send you back, but it didn't delete the record. Yeah, so I've said this is one of the places where you kind of go, okay, that's just something we have to get used to then. The command delete this record worked, as in I sent you a command, you did what I asked you to do, and that was all successful. However, because FileMaker won't allow you to delete records, you don't get an error saying, oh, I couldn't delete it. You just get actually nothing back. Okay, so that's something you have to bear in mind. I can't tell from my FileMaker script if this did or did not work, because a 204 error to me looks like a success. Yes. And there's nothing in the body of the result saying, oh, that record, that action is not allowed by your privilege set. There are other things which we will see today where we get back an actual FileMaker error. But if you try and delete this record in FileMaker and your privilege set doesn't allow you to do it, what you're going to get a FileMaker error, aren't you, Richard?
Yeah, I have a question. So your search is a non-precise search, right? So you're searching for 99, but the record is 999, and so you're
okay.
I was not thinking about security. I was thinking about, from my end, whether it was an exact match or how that search works.
No.
Right.
So it's an exact match. So that was deliberate. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm not getting an error that says I couldn't find a record with 99. Mm-hmm. Therefore, again, so I'm not getting an error like a 401 type of error saying, oh, there were no records that matched that. All I got was, hey, that looked like it worked. So now we've gone, okay, let's see what really happens when it's 999. Now what we've got is an actual FileMaker error.
Okay, so this is the error because of the security. This is your error because of the security restriction. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a kind of thing about, you have to do a bit of testing with OData to say, you can't assume that just because a result looks like it's a success, that anything has actually happened. But if there's a thing that FileMaker is blocking OData from doing, you will get a FileMaker error back in the code. So that's the error you get. If you try and delete a record and you're not allowed to, you'll get a 200 error in FileMaker in a script.
But we just tried to do a delete command, and we identified through the filter function, which is interesting, a record that doesn't exist. So it had to kind of do a search somehow or a query to find the record. Doesn't find it. So it doesn't find it to delete it, but it gives us back this green 204, right? So that to me is
because the find was successful even though there wasn't any information. Like the find worked, there just wasn't any records that had that info in it.
So if we were asking for data, and we said find the records where the user number is 99, we saw yesterday you get back an empty value array. It says there is an answer, but the answer is empty. Okay. That's like a valid thing. but the request has been successful. That said previously, go and find the records where the ID is 99, and when you found them, delete them. So the first part went off and went, I found all the records that have got 99 in. There happened to be none. Now, I don't know whether it then did try to do a delete on no records, or whether it just went, there's no records, don't do anything at all. But technically, it's gone, I just did what you asked me to do successfully. Find all of those records and then delete them. It's not giving me a count of how many I deleted or anything like that. So there's a tiny bit there. This is one of those, that's just how OData is working here. There's a kind of combination of, it's stuff from the outside, but it's interacting with FileMaker.
I have a question. So it sent back no data. So is there a setting somewhere on FileMaker server, OData, or configuration or something where you can tell FileMaker server that if you have an OData response that's null, that's blank, that doesn't have anything in it, can we insert a string in there or something, right? Besides nothing.
No, we'll do this live. We'll convert this into a GET request, find any records that have got 99 as the answer, and this is what we get back.
Okay.
We get back, there's a context thing, which is an OData thing that we have no control over. We know that there is anything that we find is in the space called value. Here, it's an empty array. That says to you and me, I didn't find anything. You asked me to do something. It was successful, but what I found is nothing. Okay. So you're saying, oh, would it be nice to kind of have a string that said, oh, I didn't find anything? But then it wouldn't be OData, because that's not how every other system in the world that runs OData works. That's the whole point.
This is why you're here, to explain that. Okay, great.
Yeah. So that's what the data API might do, because Claris engineers wrote it. This part, this is how everybody else in the world would expect it. If you gave them a weird string that said, sorry, I couldn't find anything, they'd be going, oh, I don't really understand that. What are you doing? Okay.
Okay, good.
So let me just put back that to bed.
Margaret, are you following this conversation?
I am following this, but we do have a couple. We have like 4 questions from the audience.
Okay, we have questions. Hey,
please,
stop the show. We need questions.
So
stop the show. Okay.
First question is, why did you put EQ space 99 instead of EQ 99? Like, why did you put a space in next to the 99 versus having no space with the 999 previously?
It's Postman. I was assuming that it would remove it, right? But
no.
I don't.
So let's just go back to that. So this part here, okay, so if you were watching yesterday, there's a slide in which we talk about the fact that, so here's a thing to go and watch later if you haven't seen it. The way this works is we say $filter, which is the command. I'm going to filter the things I'm doing, and the filter equals a field name. Then you have to put a space, and then the comparison, and then a space for the value. The space gets URL encoded. It's a way of, if you jumbled it all together, you wouldn't know whether the field was called user number or user number EQ. So there has to be a space between it. And because the thing that's interpreting the string you've sent it knows, oh, whenever space followed by EQ, what that means is equal to, okay? So in the parameters, anything where you're putting, it's called a comparator, has to have a space around it on both sides. Okay. Does that answer that question? It has to be like that.
Similar question. I think people are not following what's happening, because they said, why did you ask for 99 instead of 999? Because,
again, what we're trying to do is not just show everything as a success. We're also trying to go, what happens if it breaks? If we have made a mistake, or if deliberately something breaks?
He did it wrong on purpose.
Deliberately getting things wrong because there's as much to learn from when things go wrong. Because when we're doing our scripting, one of the things we saw yesterday was I just said, hey, if the result is a 200, then treat it as a success. But the result was actually a 201. A
Correct.
201 is not 200, and therefore I was assuming, oh, a 201 is not 200, it's a mistake. So part of this is as much about helping people to learn by getting things wrong as it is we can demonstrate the things working correctly, but you need to see what happens if you make a spelling mistake. If I take the space out here after the EQ, for example, I'll just do that now. Do a get. It's going to go, there's an error in the syntax because the thing that I'm sending it to doesn't understand what you mean at this point because we missed the space out there. Okay, so you're going to get that. You're going to get that back. If you put it back in, obviously it's going to work straight away. So
the tabs in Postman, params, auth, header, body, scripts, etc., are sections or parts of the URL where go variables.
So the params part, which I've just clicked there, so anything after the question mark is a parameter. So the first part is the URL where I'm sending it to. We ask a question mark. Everything after that is a parameter. So by clicking this params part, it's saying I have a parameter called $filter, and its value, as in everything after the equals sign, is user number EQ99. And as I showed yesterday, if I edit it here in this box, it will also edit it in the top part. It works both ways. The auth tab is where I enter the type of authentication. It's a basic authentication with a username and password. Postman deals with all the base64 encoding. The headers are where I can send specific headers to it. These are put in by Postman automatically, but there's some things later where we'll put in specific headers. The body is anything where I'm sending data. We've got a couple of, so when I did a create, or a patch in the body is the JSON object that I was sending. These three things at the end, we're not touching, but you can run a script or do a test before or after this has happened. That's a Postman thing. My job is not to teach you Postman. Okay, so we're only actually concerned about the four tabs. You can learn about those yourself, or maybe one day we'll do a whole separate here's how Postman really works thing. If that helps you.
Okay, Margaret, last question.
The last one is is OData a good solution for syncing FM Go applications that don't have constant internet access?
No, let's see what Richard says, because I'm interested in the answer. I would say that it would, if you're creating data, purely creating data, right? So we were talking about sync about a week and a half ago with Jesse Barnum. I had an engineer once upon a time say, I'm not going to pay Jesse Barnum $600 or whatever it was to get a copy of his sync product. I'll write it myself. And that engineer might be around here. He would remember who he is. I kind of I gave him enough rope to hang himself. He hung himself pretty well, and he swore he'd never do that again. That being said, if you have a simple sync, what we call a one-way sync, where say you're going to create a record and you just want to move it from point A to point B, right? Then if it's very simple and it's not really a sync, you're just copying files or moving them or exporting them or whatever you want to call that from your mobile device to somewhere else. Yeah, this can work for that. Okay. However, if you start getting into thing where the data is going two ways, the road to hell is paved with this kind of idea where you're going to save yourself the time and money. If you make 50 cents an hour or half a pound or whatever you're going to call that per hour, right, of labor, work, euros, whatever, then maybe write your own sync. But for anyone else who makes even minimum wage in the United States or whatever you would call that, other countries, you're going to waste a lot of time writing your own sync, right? So if Margaret, like you did take pictures from BVA, say you weren't taking pictures, just capturing some text to BVA, they create an iPhone, you want to, or another device, and you want to move it to FileMaker server, this would work for that. But if you're starting to go back and forth and see which record was updated the latest and take these fields and then bad idea.
On that, all of that is true, Richard. At the same time, I have written where an iPad app with somebody who does inspections on sites where there is no internet access and takes photographs of the work that they're doing. The methodology, so, and this is across several iPads, which makes that whole thing a little more interesting. But we did take the approach, when you get back to where there is internet, we can find out all the records that haven't been sent from your iPad to the server. But what we're not going to do is try and sync them all in one go. We're just going to go through them one at a time. Make a transfer of one record onto the server. Now, what you get back when you do that with OData is I know the unique ID of the record I just created on the server. So because I got it back, I can write that into the record I'm now on the iPad. So I know that that record was synced. And then if it all fails from now on, and I got another 50, but the internet's died, when I come back, I won't be trying to sync the first record again, because I know that it's got a unique ID somewhere else. Now, the reason for that was because if somebody had to go back a second day and take some missing photographs, then we could say, oh, I know this record has been updated, but I also know it's been synced with the server. So it's not a create record, it's a modify record command. So that absolutely worked where there was a missing photo. And so their sync was, oh, when I've got to this record, instead of creating a record on the server, I update the record on the server to have the unique ID for. And it worked for a couple of years. I'm not working on the project anymore, but it absolutely worked. And that was my first proper, could OData work as a sync mechanism? Well, yes, it could. I also agree with your comment about how much you might have paid me to write the whole thing. But equally, you'd have to pay me to integrate another product over which I have no control. So
the sync, the sync there was fairly simple, right? The added complexity would be like in our solution, Margaret, we did a sync, and either it goes or it doesn't go. And if it doesn't go, then we rewrite the record later or a different day or something like that, right? So when you start trying to say, well, is it up to date? Is it changed? Things like that, then it gets. At least my experience is that the road to hell is your customer keeps going, well, but wait, we needed to do this. And you're like, we didn't say that before. Well, yeah, but if you're going to the bathroom and it's Thursday, then it has to sync to this other server too. And then it has to do conflict detection, detect if someone on the server edited it and the mobile person, and then it has to, so it's just like, woo, not good. So, yeah, so you got through it, but customers always come to me and say, but wait, we want more. So, yes. I derailed our speaker, Margaret.
No, it's a key. The point is not just about, hey, it's a thing that works. The question is, what can we use it for as well? What should we use it for? And now we're getting to the point where we're beginning to go, oh, so you can do this, but should we? Those are valid questions. So here's my test record, and I have a field called user number and a field called city. Okay, so this record has this person's in Houston, and they have a user number of 1. Okay, and what I want to do is to update this record. Okay, so in my JSON, I've gone, okay, I'm going to, for reasons which are not strictly apparent, I want to change the city to 1234, but I want to change the user number to 1. So I'm just going to fire this off. It's a patch to that specific record. So what's going to happen now is this error. This error tells you what's wrong, but it's not very helpful if you have a large JSON object. This is a very simple JSON object. And I'm going to go to PowerPoint for 2 seconds to tell you the why behind this. You can't send a string to a number field. But also, can you send number to a text field? No, absolutely not. Before we even get to anything that's happening inside FileMaker, OData is going, you've told me that that field there is a string field and that field there is a number field, and you're trying to send this piece of data to it. That isn't going to work. It's incompatible. So let's put the 1, 2, 3, 4 into speech marks and try it again.
Oh, okay.
Okay, still doesn't work because the user number field is a number field. Okay. So now if we fire it off, yes it works. And if I show the FileMaker to show that, the city's been changed to 1, 2, 3, 4, and the user number was changed to 1 in this case. Okay, so if you have a large JSON object where you're trying to create or update records, and you get this failure that says, let me put that back into that. It's a special your new best friend, 8309 error. Something somewhere isn't right. And it's usually you are in this case sending the wrong thing to the wrong field. Now, as you and I both know, people will have a serial number field that is stored as a text field, even though the only thing it's got in it is numbers. And people have relationships. On the one side, it's a number field, and the other side, it's a string field. The issue here is it's about our own discipline, isn't it? So that was like a ridiculous thing to say. So let's go back to changing the city to Greenville. But in the meantime, Margaret noticed that John had been stupid, and decided to modify the city field. But she hasn't quite finished the work.
Yeah.
Okay? So she's still in the field here. So now I'm going to try and update that record. We'll all be guessing really quickly what happens.
It won't let you.
It's a FileMaker error. Okay?
So
OData, we're still respecting FileMaker.
So when do you get an OData error and when do you get a FileMaker error?
So OData errors are usually about the syntax of what you're trying to do, which happens before it hits FileMaker, the product, the server. So if the syntax, everything about the syntax about what you're trying to do is correct, it will then try and do it. But if for some reason FileMaker is saying, we had a 200 error before saying you don't have permission to do that. In this case, this record is locked. So it's respecting the FileMaker stuff that we want it to respect as well. So if I click out of that, so I'm now not locking the record anymore, and run it, yes, it gets updated. Okay.
Nice.
I have, for a demo, we didn't show this the other day. So this happens a lot in FileMaker. This field up in the top corner here, which contains ABC23, is a number field. Okay. And FileMaker will let us do that, as you know. It's stored as a number field. So we use that for invoice numbers, and it starts INV and a number, and we store it in there so we can use it on a layout. OData knows it's a number field, and so when we've said, hey, what's this record? It's only given me back the part which is a number. OData is going to go, you've put some text in there. That's completely ridiculous. That doesn't work at all. So let me just try this. If I change the FM number field to, let's go 34, update, that works clearly. We click over to there. It's now changed to 34. If I try and make it ABC 34, because I know FileMaker can store that, OData is going to go, no, you're trying to put some string data into a number field. You can't do that with OData. Okay, so if you are in the habit of using a number field to store alphanumeric and numeric characters, you can't use OData to create it or update it for you. So you're going to have to think about whether that really should be a text field. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So
but I have a question.
it's respecting it. Go on, far away.
Sorry, when you do the filter command to look for a specific thing, what happens if you're looking for a number field that has text in it? Will OData reject the search request to begin with?
That's a great question. So let's just put this in here. So we're going to go back to ABC 23. Okay, so that's in there. Let's go into our. No, well done, Richard. No, it's all right. I'm out. So let me just do. I think it's this request would do it. I'll just modify this request. Client. Client full question mark filter equals, and what have I called it? FM number equals space equals, and because I'm looking for ABC23, okay, so there is a record that has ABC in that field. It is defined as a number field. So is it client? Clients. Okay, so my apologies for screwing it up twice. Okay, this contains incompatible data types. You said find something where that field has something with text in it. It's not going to work. Now, you're going to say, we're going to go, hey, let's see if this works. Will it find it if I just use the numeric part? Does it find it if it finds 23? Yes, it does. But there may be lots of fields in which the number part is just 23, and therefore that may not have got you what you really want. So there's a kind of discipline thing there. We have to understand where the fences are. The fences are that OData is literally just talking to the tables and the fields. It doesn't understand what weird stuff we're doing with FileMaker, and it's obeying all its own rules, and therefore, the metadata says, I'm a number field, I'm a text field, I'm a date field, and it's going, that's what you've said you are, therefore you're trying to do something that doesn't quite work. So let's get back into here then. So where are we up to? Let's look at, should we look at scripts now? Because that's exciting. So there, let's do the PowerPoint slide first, and then we'll show it working because there's lots of things in FileMaker. To run a script in another file, you do a post. Okay, that's the first thing to know. And there is a special hidden invisible table. You know, in FileMaker, there's a thing called base tables that you can query that isn't like visible, but it's still there. There's a special table called script, and it contains a list of all of the script names in a file. Okay, and OData will use it. So /file/script with a capital S dot and your script name will run that script in the other file. Now then, anytime you tell people, oh, this doesn't work, it does cause a little bit of friction, but it does not support script names that have special characters in them. And by that, we mean the @ symbol, the ampersand symbol, and brackets. If you're in the habit of naming your script name, brackets, parameter brackets, so that helps you know what parameters you're supposed to send to the script, you cannot run that script with OData. It just does not work. I have tried it multiple ways around. You can't escape the brackets. It just does not work. So any scripts that you want to run by OData, you just have to use ASCII characters. Just stop being fancy.
So a space in your script name and underscore would be considered acceptable?
Yes, but I'm going to go, if we're doing work with OData, we're going to want to set up things in our file that we know will work without any complaint. Okay, so yeah, a script that starts with a number also won't work. Okay, so here's a slide. It just has some rules on, and we're going to have to get used to. This is the field in which we're playing. If our script names have got fancy names, or they got emojis in them, or all kinds of nonsense which people are doing, just don't do it for use with OData. You can do it the rest of the time.
I'm just going to remind everyone of a broader rule that we have, and that is that when we name things, we're frequently trying not to use the cute symbols with the names, because people say, well, it works just fine in FileMaker. As soon as you do anything squirrely outside of FileMaker, OData just being one of multiples, your stuff is not going to work. It'll break, and then you'll be pulling your hair out, because doing this is hard enough without the funky naming, right? And you'll see me a lot of times where I won't even use spaces sometimes. If I'm in a sensitive area, I'll just use underscores or whatever to separate. But yeah, this is why I have that rule, and here is John making the case of why I have that rule. So anyway,
we're working with somebody else's rules here, aren't we?
Well, yes.
And then the fourth,
it's all your fault.
The fourth component, it's my fault. The fourth component is that we can send something to the script in the other file. It has to be sent as a JSON object, and the top level of that is called script parameter value, written exactly like that. Okay, so this is one of those, you just have to know it has to be that. Okay, but you can send anything you like to another script at all, as long as it's in that bit of JSON. It can be just a simple string or a number. It can be full-on JSON objects, in the same way that we currently do with our FileMaker parameters. So the script that's receiving gets the script parameter, and so you can use the get script parameter step at the head of the script to grab that. Obviously, this is running totally on the server. This command happens on the server, so it's like a PSOS thing. All the PSOS rules apply. there's no interaction. You can't have dialog boxes. If you use a card window, it'll be changed to a dialog window. Some things just don't work on server. And the other thing is, if you need the action of the script to be working on a specific record in a specific layout and a specific table, you have to send the information to the script to tell it, you need to be here to do this. Otherwise, as we all know, you send a delete command and you're in the wrong place and suddenly all of your records have disappeared. In that script, anything that's in the exit script step as data gets passed back through OData to you. Now, I don't know where you stand on this, Richard, but I would gladly shoot any developers who don't put an exit script step automatically at the end of their scripts. Okay?
Yep, that's fine. We can go to a gunfight together, but that's just but I practiced, so you know. So yeah, no, it's
No, I know you practice, but there's several reasons why. You can always put a pause on it so that your script doesn't just jump out when it's run and you've lost all the variables.
You know, as dumb as this
But
is,
here's
I've
an-
never seen that until we had this live stream with you, where we would put an exit script everywhere. And I guess I just don't catch enough of people's presentations, but
Yeah.
it was like, really?
But the reason is here, I do want something to be passed back to me.
Yes. No,
because
absolutely.
I'm going to run a script, and at the very least, I want to know what happened when the script ran. Did it work properly? Was there a fault? And things. When it gets back to me, the JSON that I get back looks something like that. I get back a script result. The code of 0 means the get last error was 0, and the result parameter part is what was in the exit script step. So it could just be some simple text. It could be a whole JSON object all by itself. And obviously, I'd therefore be going, oh, JSON get element of the result, it's script result dot result parameter. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but again, that's just something else you need to learn, copy and paste a million times. And we're going to see what happens in a moment to come back to that slide. So in my test file here, I have a script which I'm going to go into script workspace. Yeah, that'll do. I'm just going to run the script and we'll show it working first. Okay. So I'm going to send something to that file. I've got an answer back. Okay. So that proves that it works. That's the wrong script for me to do. Let me go into Postman. Have I got a script in here? Here we go. Here's a simple script. So let me show you this script, just so you know what the magic is. There's a script in Richard's file called demo. It's going to take the script parameter. It's going to add John says in front of whatever that parameter is, and then send it straight back to me. Okay. So in Postman, I'm going to send it good afternoon in the script parameter value to that script. So therefore, it's going to add John says that. So we'll change that, just for the sake of the people who are on a different time frame. So all it's doing is some processing. What the script is doing is not relevant. I'm sending a parameter, the script is changing something about the parameter and sending it straight back to me. In this more complicated script, let's just look at what the script is doing. What the script is doing is it's taking the parameter, it's deleting the name value from the parameter that I got sent, and it's adding to the parameter the time processed as a timestamp, and it's adding a more complicated JSON thing, the data training. as a string to it. So it's deleting one part, adding another part, and then sending it back. So I'm sending it a name, an action, a time sent. The name will disappear, and it will add, something will be added to it. So let me fire that off. There we go. In what I get back, the action that I sent is still there. This JSON thing is like a proper nested piece of JSON. The time processed has stayed the same, and the time sent has been added. Now, interestingly, because we're not querying a field, this date and timestamp is a FileMaker date and timestamp that I've put into a piece of JSON and sent back. So that's why it appears as a string, because I'm not asking for that data as an OData query. I'm asking for it as a FileMaker thing, okay? So that was the result of get host timestamp. So let me look at something to do with that. If I trigger the same thing in FileMaker from here, I want to show you what I'm now doing here. So this is the script that says, hey, do the same thing. And when we come back, let me just turn these off, because this, what I'm about to show you, is also really important to learn. So I'm running that script over there. There you go. There's a result that I got back. It's exactly the same as it was in Postman. But what I'd like to know is, what I really want is, what was the number value as a get UTC milliseconds timestamp? I want to get the time sent from the answer before I do anything. Okay, I want to know what time this action happened. So I'm going to have to turn these on, because I'm going to have to show you something about what does and does not happen. So the second. So here's the raw data that I got back. Okay, here is, oh, I asked for the time sent out of that, and I can't see a value. That is the script result.parameter. So I know that it's sending this value back somewhere. If I make it some JSON, it looks like it's proper JSON. And now I've got the time sent. So what's going on there? Okay. So when you get this back, that looks like JSON, but it's actually just a string. Okay, so if I do any kind of JSON query on it, it's not JSON, it's just a string, and therefore I don't get the question mark saying the JSON query that you just didn't work properly, and so here's a question mark. I just get, I can't do anything with that. So what we have to do is we have to take the bit that's been sent as the returned parameter. That again looks like JSON to you and me right now, but it's not actually JSON, it's a string. But something like the JSON format elements will take that string, and if it's valid and legal JSON, we'll go, okay, there you go, I've now converted that to JSON so that I can do that action with it. Now it is JSON, I can run a JSON query on it. I can tell you it took me several hours the first time I ever experienced that to work out what was really going on. Because it's a kind of confusing thing if nobody's told you, oh yeah, what you get back if you're sending JSON back, it's just a string. You have to extract it, convert it to actual JSON, and then you can run some queries on it. So my script here, oh, sorry, I just ran the script instead of showing it you. So here, what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm creating a variable. I'm getting from the result the script result.result parameter, which is a string, but then I'm running the format elements command on that string, which will make it, as far as FileMaker is concerned, JSON. I'm putting it into a variable because then I can run any query on that newly transformed bit of string. So I can get the time sent, or I can get the name, or I can get the action, or I can get something else. Okay. So if you send JSON back and you want to do things with it, it's a two-step process because it's being sent as text over the internet, and we can send anything as a string of text. FileMaker has to know how to convert it. Okay. So let's go. That's a bit more of an advanced lesson for today. Let me do this one because that's a good point to stop. I've got something else that I can do, but we can there's an Excel demo I was going to do. One of the things that causes FileMaker developers' heads to explode, I mean literally explode, and if they don't, to induce rage that I have the like of which I have never seen before, is when you tell people they can't call their field something that they've been doing for 20 years because now it won't work. Okay. And I said a couple of days ago, we've moved into a land. OData has its own set of reserved words, and this is about calling a field ID or any variation of ID, just ID, 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 however you call it, calling a field ID. If that field is your key value field, okay? So I always call my key fields unique ID because that's what it actually is. It's a UID, okay? Now, we know that we get things back from the internet from a service like jot forms, and it'll go ID, and this is the ID of the form. So we're going to be storing things that are somebody else's ID in a field called ID. If you call a field ID, you can use it in a filter if you escape it. So you can say and filter where ID equals, in that case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to change. I don't know why I wrote. I think this was a slide I was doing. I said to Margaret, I was just doing a slide before I started. This was the one. I clearly wasn't paying attention. So you need to escape anything that is ID. If you just put ID as the name of the field, it won't work. And the reason is because internally, OData has a concept of what ID is. The ID, in the absence of anything else, is in fact the record ID. There are, however, several other places where things that you're going to try and do in FileMaker with OData, or anywhere with OData, calling your field ID, it's not going to work. But that's because mostly, if this is a key field, people are not doing a search on a key field. They're doing a search on some other field that has data in it. Because the idea of as a key, as you know, is that key is not data. The key is a key. So you would do a search on name equals Richard, or name equals John, or name equals Margaret. That makes sense. But if I know that the ID of your record is 1, 2, 3, then I won't actually be wanting to do a filter on ID is 1, 2, 3, there's another way to do it, and that's a teaser for something that I'll show you tomorrow. But on the subject of calling your field ID, the answer is please just consider that I'm going to tell you in certain places this is absolutely going to break. And I do know that every time I say that, people get angry about, well, why can't I do that? FileMaker lets me do it. Well, OData is not so compliant.
Can ID be on the beginning of the name, like ID or something, or?
Yes, ID number, ID field, ID text, not a problem. It's just when it's called ID.
By itself. Okay. We have some
Yeah.
questions. Margaret, you want to jump through some questions here? So, let me I'm going to jump this. Margaret, if you want to ask them, and I'll rip through them pretty quick. And then if John wants to interact, I'll let him take a drink real quick.
Yep. OData is a standardized API server to interact with databases? Question mark.
OData is a standardized, I want to call it a protocol or technology that allows people who are not familiar with your database structure to go and talk to your database or weather service or whatever you want to do. So as a reminder, day 1 and day 2, we kind of covered this. As a quick refresher, FileMaker server.
Let's see if I can find a slide.
FileMaker server has a OData capability to take OData requests and send data back out. Okay. And so we have a database where we're making queries against the database. We typically generically would make the query in Postman or some other technology. After we built that or demoed that or get it going in Postman, we can, as FileMaker developers, put the request as a OData request in FileMaker Pro or Go or something, and have it go to and make a request to the FileMaker server to even another database, right? So I think in the broad scheme of the world, in our situation, we would maybe make an OData call from our client to some other service, like I want the latest weather where I'm at in Florida, and I get the data back. Or we have our own weather service called Richard's. Like say I take the temperature of the executives at Claris, right, for example. And I have a service that says Claris executives are happy or they're frothing mad or some shit like that. And so you could make a call to Richard's service called Claris Executive Weather, and it tells you whether they're stormy and unhappy. You don't have to know that it's FileMaker on my side. You're just making an OData call. Happens to be I use FileMaker on my side. You get the request, the data comes back. So the fact that some of his demos have FileMaker on both sides is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but just understand that really OData is about kind of this generic, like if you had a generic language that was used all the way around the world, right? So it's not English, it's not, Spanish or German or Italian or whatever, generic, then that's what this kind of is. It's a generic.
So that's the slide we showed. There are 3 use cases. One is I can talk, if I understand OData, I can talk to somebody else's system without knowing who made the system or how it's put together. I can, somebody else, so that, for example of that, the Microsoft Graph API, everything to do with talking to the Azure API is OData. Okay, if I understand OData, I can do things with Microsoft. Because FileMaker now has an OData layer in front of it, anybody else who knows OData can talk to my FileMaker server without knowing it's FileMaker and the Draco engine or any of those things. And the third case is clearly, I can talk from FileMaker to some other FileMaker file on my server or somebody else's server. So there are 3 use cases for what OData has done for us. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Next question, Margaret. That was a good question, though.
OData uses the table names that are in the relationship graph? Question mark.
Yes, it works on table occurrences as you name them, not the raw tables underneath. It works on table occurrences on the relationship graph. So all of those of you who have monstrous anchor buoy relationship graphs, you don't need half of what's on there anymore. You need it to work for FileMaker. Yeah, and all of those the special widgets you put in, you don't need that. you may be best to just create a few table occurrences that have simple names just for the use of OData, because that will work.
Yep.
Next question. Good question.
OData uses HTTP error codes, question mark.
Yes. So that's what I'm talking about, is what comes back as the header. So yes, in Postman, that response gave me a 200, which is an HTTP error code. It's an error code of success. When things don't work, I'm going to get 400s and 404s and 500s. But yes, it's because it's sent over HTTP. It's using the way that the web works to send something like we do with any other API.
Right.
Next question.
You said earlier this week that when running your local FileMaker file, you had to be in the same context. Does this mean that your local file has to have the same table names and field names as the file on the server to interact with it?
No, not at all. So that was about the fact that I was running a request, and in the request, it contained a link to a field on a table. But when I ran the script, I wasn't on that layout. So therefore, the request wasn't getting made properly. So all of that stuff is just how you would be creating your well-practiced FileMaker scripts anyway. If you want to send a script parameter, you have to be on the right layout, on the right records to include the right value in the script parameter. But essentially, the point is, it's a bigger point about the fact, though, that at the other end in the query, it's got nothing to do with the layouts, except when you run a script, but it's just talking to tables. So the layouts are not involved. That was to do with me sending a script to create the OData request. I happened to be in the wrong place, and therefore my request was screwed because I wasn't on the right table, I wasn't on the right record.
Last question. If OData is talking to a child table occurrence that is filtered by a parent table occurrence, is the data that OData is talking to also preemptively filtered?
That's a good question, and we will cover it tomorrow, but I am going to show you that as the best way rather than talking about it. So let's go to, so this record here, it's a client, and here's a portal that I've added 2 projects to. Okay, so real quick, here is a request that says for this client, if I've just added /projects on the end, what that says is show me the projects for that client. Click send, and here is the answer. That data is from the projects table for that client. Now, what we'll also do tomorrow is show you how to include the data from the client table as well as the projects table. But so effectively, because it's a navigation paradigm that says, hey, this particular client, I'm adding something after it saying go from that client into the projects. If the project had a further table that was attached to it, I could add that in the URL. Hopefully that answers the question, but we're going to look at that in a bit of detail tomorrow. So we are going to just check as our sanity check, Richard, before we go, that Margaret has followed today and she hasn't felt lost at any point.
Margaret, are you lost? What's your deal?
No, I'm good. I thought I followed today. The discussion about the strings and like text can't go into numbers and numbers can't go into text and how the search and the filter function works is really interesting. The fact that you have to format your parameters into JSON data after you get it back or else you can't actually work with it is interesting. And
yeah,
I would also hit my head against the major wall for that one.
There's things I'm telling you, you just have to know. If you don't know it already, this is your kickstart to being advanced rather than stumbling around in the dark. So, okay, I'm good.
Very good. All right, we'll catch you tomorrow for day 4 of our OData conversation.